So we've been working in Photoshop with our paintings where what we're doing is you all will do like a drawing or a pen and ink drawing, pencil drawing, something like that. You might do some shading and some detail in it. And then you're scanning that or photographing that and bringing that into Photoshop and then painting on top of that, which gives you a really specific look, which is fine. But I want to show you another technique that you can use. And this may be a good technique for some of you who may not be real confident in your drawing skills, but you know how to use Illustrator. So this is going to use Illustrator or something like Illustrator as a starting point that you can then bring your work into Photoshop. So some of you who don't necessarily draw a lot, you might want to try this. You can totally do that. But let me kind of just go over the technique here. Okay, so this is my character sketch or drawing for, say, something like Project 4. And I want to colorize this. Now, what I could do is just bring it into Photoshop, clean it up, do some cleaner lines, and just do a really nice drawing, bring it in, and just paint it like we've been painting it. But instead, what I want to do is I don't want any lines on this. I just want everything to be color with no outlines. So, and I'm not going to get into a big Illustrator demo, but if you know how to use Illustrator, basically what you do is you create shapes, fill them with color to build your illustration. So what I would do is something like this, where I bring the sketch in and trace over it in Illustrator and end up with something like this, where everything is just a solid, flat color. There's no shading or anything. It's just all flat color. And if I look at the underlying object, it's a bunch of objects I've drawn and filled with color. So if you know how to use Illustrator, you'll understand this. If not, you might want to learn how to use Illustrator. It's a really good program to know how to use. But so something like this, in this case, is where I would start. Okay, so I've got my basic illustration done. I've done a lot of the work. I've got my character finished. All the flat color is there, or the local color is what that's called. Say, like if your jeans are blue, blue is the local color. Highlights and shadows are just darker and lighter values of those things. So I've got all my flat color done. Now I want to go in and add some detail and shading and stuff like that. You can do it in Illustrator, but I want something a little more painterly. And Illustrator doesn't lend itself to a painterly effect, but I know Photoshop does. So what I want to do is, now that I got this finished, I just want to make sure, like I've got a drawing layer and a photo layer. I want to make sure that I get the drawing layer here and throw it away. So all that's left is the actual illustration. Okay. Then what I want to do is I just want to save it. Okay. And that's all I have to do in Illustrator. Then when I go and open it up in Photoshop, what I'm going to do is go to File, Open, and navigate to where it's at. There it is. And Photoshop will open an Illustrator file because they're both made by Adobe. So it will open just a regular Illustrator file. You don't have to save it any special way. So that's what you want to do. Now, some of your settings, you want to here enable all readable documents. That'll just show you everything that you can open in Photoshop. Format Adobe PDF. You can just leave that and hit Open. You'll get another screen where it's going to import the document as PDF. For whatever reason, it wants to pretend like it's a PDF. So you see a little thumbnail of your image here. If you want to make that larger, you can click here and make it larger. And you want to keep Pages selected. You'll see the name of it. Crop to. What you want to do on Crop to, you have options of the bounding box. And what you see there is that the bounding box refers to the farthest edges of any of the vectors that you drew in Illustrator. You don't want that. You want the media box, which takes into account the size of the page you created it on, which is 8.5 by 11. So if I change that, yeah, I want a media box for that. Where it says anti-aliased, for this technique, we want to turn that off, and I'll show you why later. But we want to turn that off, make sure our image is 8.5 by 11, make sure our resolution is 300 pixels per inch, because that's a high resolution image for something that you're going to print at 100% of the size, right? So if you're going to print at 8.5 by 11, you need a resolution of 300 pixels per inch. Mode RGB, you can leave that. You don't need to worry about any of the rest of this. And hit OK. And what happens is Photoshop rasterizes it, which means it turns all of those vector shapes that we see in the Illustrator document, all of these, what I can do is I can go in and grab a shape and move it and take all those apart and start moving shapes because they're individual objects. What Photoshop is going to do, it's going to convert it all to just a bunch of pixels of different colors and hues. So if I zoom in really close, I can see all the individual pixels that make up the image. Okay? All right, so that's really important. And what we get is this really hard edge, a really clear delineation between two different colors. Okay? It's this color is definitely different from that color. There's no in between. That's what we want. We want a clean separation between each of the colors. So if I look here, it's good clean separation. And that's what turning anti-aliasing off does. Okay, so let me show you the difference. So this is not anti-aliased. If I open the same image, but this time I turn anti-aliasing on, what happens is when I zoom up really close, you start to see this where those colors blend together. Okay? And we don't want that. See how that kind of looks fuzzy? We lose that really sharp edge on everything and things start to get fuzzy. Now it's meant to do that to help the image look smoother, but for our purposes, we don't want that. Here's another good example. See around the mouth? It created this shadow line here, right? Because it's anti-aliasing and it's trying to blend these colors together. But in the original, what we see is we don't have that line. We've got a good, clean separation of color. Now that's important because of the way we're going to use this new technique I'm going to show you. Okay. Now what I want to do is I want to be able to paint this image. So I'm going to go ahead and create my new layer. Okay. What I could do, let's say I want to put a shadow in the ear here between the face and the ear and kind of darken that up a little bit. I'm going to do a new layer here. I'm going to make that multiply. I'm going to pick my brush and let's use our eyedropper tool and pick this color. So if I hold down the Option key, it switches to the eyedropper tool. It might be different on Windows. On a Mac, it's Option. On a Windows, it's one of those. It might be Alt. But if I do that and click, if you watch down here, wherever I click, that becomes my foreground color. So I'll click this because that's dark. I want the shadow to be a little bit darker than that even, right? So I'll just go over here, darken that up a little bit. And I could go in and I could really carefully try to paint. And this is tricky without a mouse or without a tablet. So I've got that. That's pretty awful. I could go in and try to, you know, smudge that and smear that and make it not look so bad. Okay, but I don't get a good clean edge. Okay, and if I turn my opacity down, so, you know, that's a shadow, right? But it's really jacked up. It's not a good clean edge. What I want to do is get a good clean edge without having to work real hard. So let's go back and undo dodge. Well, let's just go ahead and delete. There we go. So back to where I started. I want to do this line again. So what I want to do is I want to create a mask where it only lets me paint on certain areas. The way you're going to do that is over here in your toolbar. Under it's 1, 2, 3, the fourth one down. Typically what you might see is this, or the quick selection tool, or the magic wand. The magic wand tool is what you want. Okay, what it does is it lets you click and select a range of pixel values. Across the top here, sample size is point sample size. That means it's going to pick one pixel color select that. Let's zoom up on this. Tolerance is how many, it's like the range of values of a color. Okay, so if I have a tolerance of 1, it's going to pick and click here. What it does is it only picks a color that's exactly that value, right? So that color. Okay, if I increase that to, let's say, 5, there still aren't any colors around this value that are within that 5 tolerance value. Okay, now if I make this 30, 33, and hit that, and click it, what you'll see is it's selected a wider range of colors, like it's selected this entire face, the skin, because those values are really close. They're within this 33 tolerance, if that makes sense. If I increase this to, say, 88 and click, it expands, and it also grabs the color for the hair and so on and so forth. So that's what tolerance does. It expands the range of colors that it selects when you click. Now, because we want to just select these flat colors, I'm going to keep this at 1 because I know it only selects that one color. And what I know a selection does, when I make a selection, it protects the area outside the selection. It allows you to work on just specific areas of the image. So what I want to do is I want to do my shadow on the ear here. So I'll use my magic wand tool with a tolerance of 1 on my image that has not been anti-aliased. I'm going to click here. It grabs this color, but I want both of those, right? Because I'm going to do a shadow along the ear, so I can hold down Shift and click again. It adds this new click to that selection. Then all I've got to do is grab my brush tool, and I'm going to do like a big giant brush here. Here, and do something large. And then I can do like a lower opacity, and I can just kind of come in here and shade that. And what you'll see is we get this good, really crisp edge. Okay, we get this nice, we keep that good hard edge, but we get this really nice blend that there it is without, there it is with. Okay. So then I could go in and the same thing, get the wand tool, and the key command is W if you keep losing it. So I can click here and get my brush. Key command for brush is B, and I can just go in and kind of do a little painting there and a little shading. And let's say I want to shade inside his ear a little bit. Again, W for the wand tool, click. B for the brush. I can go in and do a real quick shade around his inside of his ear to give it some depth. Okay. So that's a really good way to kind of make things protected, so you can do some quick shading. Same, let's do like part of his bandana. Again, W click to select that, or W shift click will again select multiple things. Again, I'm going to use a darker color, and I'm on my new layer. I'm going to go ahead and rename this layer Shadows. Okay. And that way I kind of know what that is. So I can go in and I can darken this up. All right. And that might be a little dark, so I'm just going to use my eyedropper tool and grab this red and maybe paint over it a little bit with my opacity back to a higher value. Oops. Okay, so I screwed it up. The good thing about this is I'm on my own layer, a new layer. I can just hit erase, increase the size of my brush, and then I could start all over again. Pick maybe a different color and a lower opacity. I just don't want it to get too dark, so I'm going to use a lower opacity and a couple strokes and maybe a little bit of shade there. All right, and if you have any questions about this technique, drop me a line, shoot me an email, ask me a question, and I'll be happy to help. All right, thanks.